You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Gunter. And in this episode, we are going to explore how our inner dialogue can affect our self-esteem, mood, and overall well-being. So what am I talking about? Well, basically, I'm talking about those negative narratives or negative self-talk, which is an internal dialogue that we all experience from time to time. These thoughts can be self-critical, pessimistic, but mostly tend to be untrue. What I want to do in this podcast is to discuss how these narratives can impact our mental health and a few strategies how to overcome that. Now, you might be asking me, why am I focusing on this topic? Well, because having been around for a long time, one of the things that I've discovered is that each generation, in essence, has some gripes about how difficult their lives are compared to other generations. And there's some truth in it, but mainly what we're talking about is comparing apples with oranges. If I was a peasant in the Middle Ages, especially if I was female, I very much doubt that I think that women today have got it tough. But that's not the only point why I want to talk about this. I have compassion for each generation in this narrative, in a sense. What I'm on about is that I'm concerned at the prevalence and impact that this negative and those negative narratives have, not just on ourselves individually, but also what it does to the community and to relationships within the community, which is essentially fragment them. I just recently actually got trolled. Well, it was sort of not really trolled, but a lot of prejudices were expressed in terms of my, sex, in terms of my age, and in terms of what I should be doing by people who don't know me, like being accused of lacking empathy. You don't get to where I am in life without some empathy, especially professionally. So let me bring this into context. And one of the things I want to focus on essentially is helping people understand what negative narratives are and how they affect mental health. So let's start by defining it and how it has an impact. Negative narratives are thoughts and beliefs we have about ourselves that are self-critical, pessimistic, and as I said, often untrue. These narratives have an immediate impact on our emotional state, but also they flow on to affect our self-esteem, general mood, and overall well-being. So, for instance, in depression, we talk about the cognitive triad, which is a negative narrative that we have about ourselves, the world and people in it, and the future. We need to take stock of that and test it. Is that really true? When I talk about negative self-talk, I'm talking about that inner little voice that keeps going around and round and round and round and making us feel rotten. Over time, that can begin to cause feelings of worthlessness and self-doubt, which again contributes to mental health conditions such as depression and anxiety, like I just said. Negative self-talk can also create a constant state of stress Now, one of the things that I'm particularly cognizant of is that in the last 35 to 40 years, the idea that, for example, women can have everything and that they should be fantastic mothers but also hold down these tremendous careers has created a level of stress that is extraordinarily problematic for women to resolve. Now, a lot of women see that we as men haven't needed to change at all, that we just keep plodding away. We get up, go to the job, come back, whilst they're juggling everything. And there is an element of truth in that. I'm not letting us blokes off the hook here. We have managed to avoid, in some respects, taking a fair share of responsibility within our domestic life. But at the same time, you try getting a partnership in one of the big four firms, if you're constantly going, I need Friday off because my kids got sport, I need to be home early to pick my kids up from daycare, eventually the bosses are going to tap you on the shoulder and go, you know what? You're not partnership material. And that is a direct consequence of this patriarchal ideology that we've been sustaining for millennia. Okay, what else is a problem here? Well, let me talk a little bit about the types of negative narratives and how they manifest in our lives. So, one common type of negative self-talk is perfectionism, and this is particularly a problem these days. Social media has sent us down a spiraling trap that just creates this nightmare existence for many of us. The problem with perfectionism is that it's inattainable. We have these impossibly high standards, and again, women are particularly thrown under the bus with this one, where not only are they supposed to have babies and mother, they're also supposed to be awake in a job, looking $1,000,000 and being these sexual dynamos in the bedroom. Now, let me assure you, any one of you who've had kids hanging off their hip all day, or even just for part of the day, is going to experience a drop in needing, wanting, and desiring physical contact. It just comes with the territory. But then, we, sometimes men, but women in themselves, expect that they should be able to do this. It's not true. So, one of the things that perfectionism is about is actually anxiety, self-doubt, and at times can create depression. The other negative narrative that goes on in our head is catastrophizing. Catastrophizers tend to imagine the worst case scenario in every situation, leading to feelings of anxiety and worry. So if you're paying attention here, you're beginning to see a bit of a pattern, and that is a lot of our negative narratives are about anxiety, right? Either ego anxiety, i.e., am I good enough? Or performance anxiety, i.e., can I do this to perfection? Or symptom anxiety, which is, oh, I'm anxious about being anxious because in my head, I shouldn't be anxious about this. And in that thinking, we begin to actually engage with avoidance behaviours in order to limit our expectations of ourselves and get other people to limit their expectations of us. Another type of negative self-talk is negative filtering. Negative filters focus only on the negative aspects of a situation, ignoring any positive part. This type of negative self-talk generally leads to feelings of hopelessness and despair, and in fact, the very cornerstones to some degree about depression. So at this point, many of you are probably going, well, this is sounding pretty grim. And it is in a way. But there's a silver lining in the cloud, okay? And that is because it's thinking, it is not cast in concrete. Most of us change our mind about stuff all the time. So, again, we can change the negative narrative in our mind as well. And one way of doing that is the Stoics were really good at this, okay? And one of the offshoots of Stoicism was a line in Hamlet where Hamlet says, "Things are neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so." So, one of the ways that I want to inspire change in all of those of you who are listening and paying attention to the message and accept that I'm not being unsympathetic or unempathic to the plight of this generation is that we need to really pay attention to what we're buying into and asking ourselves the question, do we really need to buy into that? And, rather than going, well, this is what society expects and this is what I should attempt to meet, take a step back. At the moment, from my perspective, society is pretty fucking crazy. And it's about time that a lot of us take a step back and go, am I going to continue to play the game, or am I going to change myself, change my expectations, and start putting things into place that will help us as a collective to change, to make society less perfectionistic, less success-oriented in this materialistic way, okay? So let's focus on what do you need to do to overcome negative narratives. So the first step, and this is fundamentally important, is to recognize when and how your negative self-talk actually occurs. A lot of us actually don't know that we're stuck in a negative narrative. Now, once you become aware of that negative self-talk, you can challenge it. Now, that can be with some positive thinking, but I'm a big believer in being rational, logical, and objective. So, for instance, if you find yourself thinking, I'm not good enough, challenge it. Where's the evidence for that? I seem to be really capable in most areas, and I've also been able to accomplish a whole bunch of stuff in my past. That doesn't actually connect well with the idea that I'm not good enough. Another strategy I think that's often mistakenly censored is self-compassion. Treat yourself in the same kindness and understanding that you would offer to a really good friend. I often talk about, I'm here to help you establish a relationship with yourself that is safe and secure and resembles your relationship with your best mate. Additionally, practicing logical, rational thinking is really, really useful. And one thing that helps us get there is to practice mindfulness, wherein you become more aware of your thoughts and feelings, and it allows you to catch negative self-talk before it spirals out of control. So mindfulness, like meditation and deep breathing, gets you more present in the moment rather than stuck in the past and, anticipating a catastrophic future. So in this context, I think there's a whole range of things that we can do on a daily basis that is going to it's not going to magically make negative narratives go poof and disappearing, but it's going to give us a counterbalance to the point where eventually we're able to take ownership for ourselves rather than blaming or projecting whatever it is that we're feeling negatively onto others. It's often interesting how we accuse someone of prejudices, and when you examine how they're doing that, it's actually their own prejudices that they're expressing. Now, this is available on the internet. All you need to do, for example, is to check out things like positive psychology, rational emotive behavior therapy, ACT, acceptance and compassion therapy. There's a whole range of therapies, because one of the coping strategies that I want to stress is that, worst comes to worst, let's select a therapist. Let's actually get some help around this. If I'm really, really stuck, let me not flounder in my own sort of pond of scum, but rather get out of it, strip it back and go, okay, what is it that I need that is firstly going to make me feel safe and secure in my relationship, to make me flexible, to make me adaptable, and to allow me to become much, much more resilient. And part of that is I need to be able to accept and validate what I'm feeling. And then I need to understand the source of those feelings, which are mostly from these negative narratives that I have in my head, right? Just bring into play self-awareness. Weigh it up. Be objective about it. Don't just buy into your thoughts because they're your thoughts. I often have to work with people who are deeply distressed and disturbed, and often they lose the boundary between this is my thought and this is me. My thoughts are just my thoughts. I can examine them, I can look at them, I can, work with them, and I can also just ignore them. Sometimes all of us have some crazy thinking. If I get called up in traffic or someone cuts me off in traffic, if someone had a look into my head and, paid attention to what I'm thinking, it's not necessarily that pretty. Would I ever act on it? No. The answer is a blatant no. Now, once we can pick up on our own negative narrative, our own negative self-talk, our own irrational beliefs, attitudes, dialogue, then we can help, especially our children, to pick up on that as well. Which brings me to fundamentally my next podcast. And I want to talk about negative narratives. And as a dad, I want to talk about how negative narratives can affect my relationship with my children, especially with my son. And I want all of you dads out there to really tune in on this, because it is vitally important. Negative narratives, that they're cultural memes that can act as much as rendering me helpless, but also creating a message to others that you're helpless about this, and there is nothing you can do. And the last thing I want to do is engender a sense of helplessness and hopelessness in my kids. I want them to feel empowered. I want them to be able to go into the world resilient. Stand up for yourself. Stand up against the bullshit that our society often tries to promulgate on us and inflicts on us, or wants to make us drink the Kool-Aid. So until next time, this is me, your host, Gunter, signing off. And if you are inspired by this, go out and inspire others. Until next time, speak then.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit makinggoodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda@noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at NOIRTAINMENT.com.